Oh yeah, that does that, I guess, when we start the recording. Hopefully everyone's willing and back online. Let me just share my screen again. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay? Great.
Yep, you can see it fine.
Perfect.
Yep.
So welcome everyone to this webinar on where to access government funding in the UK with a focus on onshore and offshore wind. We have a lovely list of speakers here today to run you through the different organizations helping you invest in the UK and in wind more broadly in the UK. So our lovely host is Carl John, who's wearing a lovely green tie today. So Carl, please hand over to you and enjoy the session.
Thank you very much, Tancred. Yes, hello everybody. Good afternoon. My name's Carl John. I work in the Department for Business and Trade in our renewable energy team, particularly focused on offshore wind, but have an interest in also the onshore side of things. Welcome today. As you can see on screen, we have a whistle-stop tour of lots of different organisations in the UK. The good news is most of them, if not all of them, have got money and they are wanting to help the UK build a more powerful supply chain in offshore wind going forward. It's an interesting time in offshore wind. Currently in the UK, we're running our 7th allocation round. It's actually in process. It's getting to the exciting stage in about a week and a half's time where people will have to start bidding for rights to build their offshore wind farms. We've got an enormous pipeline running at a really quite moderately large budget that we think is going to bring between 5 and 6 gigawatts of offshore wind forward in the next period. Not forgetting, we run auctions on an annual basis in the UK, so it's not a one-off event. It's a sort of business as usual allocation of offshore wind. So as I said, the UK currently has a 16.7 gigawatt installed base. I just looked at the statistics today. We're generating 34% of all the UK's energy is coming from wind. And as you hopefully will know, we have an ambition to get to below 50 grams of carbon per kilowatt hour generated in the electricity system by 2030. So that is where we're going from. Not only have we got great deployment ambitions, but we also have a great eye on what this can do to the industrial landscape. So this slide is showing you sort of the typical journey for new businesses wanting to enter offshore wind in the UK, where we can potentially help provide funding support in various forms, as you'll find out shortly. But it's where we want to very much work with investors coming into the UK to do that. So Tancred, if we go to the next slide, please, we'll refer back to that one probably fairly frequently. As you can see, we've got a whole list of them. And perhaps to start with, if I could introduce Samuel from Great British Energy. Samuel.
Hi, good afternoon. Pleasure to speaking to you. My name is Sam Leisner. I'm Head of Investment Strategy, Commercial Lead at Great British Energy. I think I'll just give you this 5-minute overview of what we're doing, who we are. So first of all, like Great British Energy, we are a publicly owned energy company, and we want to power Britain with clean, secure, homegrown energy. We want to become a leader in the state-owned energy company sector. We have a really clear mission, which is to drive clean energy deployment, to create jobs, boost energy independence, and ensure UK taxpayers, bill payers, and communities get the benefits of clean, secure, homegrown energy. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yes, brilliant. Where we are, we had a quite rapid pace over the last months, year. We were established a bit more than a year ago now. Had a headquarters in Aberdeen confirmed, as far as Scotland as well, and we have announced a £300 million supply chain fund in April. We received a royal assent through the Great British Energy Act in May, and announced 200 million for solar panels for schools and hospitals as well in May already. Earlier this year, we've also announced up to £1 billion in offshore wind supply chain investment, and we received a statement of strategic priorities by the Secretary of State, where we should focus our activities. We're currently preparing our strategic plan of where we want to go. Next slide, please. We are structured basically in 3 functions to support the sector. On the investment side, it's leading the development of clean energy assets, including inception, owning, and operating, so the whole life cycle, to generate returns from these assets for the taxpayer in the long term, but also co-developing, building, operating projects with partners as a minority investors, equity stakes, but also joint ventures. On the supply chain side, we want to play more role as a catalyst, so catalyzing investment from existing public finance sources, but also like creating this like public-private ecosystem to accelerate the expansion of UK supply chain capabilities. So we're really looking at any kind of issues which can be helped by strategic funding from GB Energy and the supply chain, particularly also in the offshore wind sector, which I will come a bit more in detail. And we want to do this to really like create jobs and build long-term domestic resilience and economic growth. And then our third function is around the local function, and here we will deliver with the Department of Energy Security the local power plan, and we will really increase the deployment of community energy in the UK. So big ambition to increase the community energy models in the UK, and in particular for renewable generation. So together with local government. Next slide. On our investment side in particular, as I mentioned, we will invest in, develop, and own assets. So we'll support it through the whole life cycle. We have been capitalized in total with 6 billion overall, including the supply chain side, for capital and financial transaction. This gives us a lot of flexibility how we want to crowd in, how we want to invest our equity in energy generation in the UK. And we will work very closely with our strategic partner, National Wealth Fund, and the Crown Estate, from which you will hear a bit more later. Ultimately, we want to become an energy company, so we will reinvest our returns into clean energy projects, support the British public. And then in the long term, we want to evolve into a developer, like an energy company, and an owner-operator of strategic assets, and to put energy back into the hands of the British public. We will own stakes in the projects we develop. But we will be a co-developer with private sector, local authority, community energy project groups. Our aim is not to like crowd out. We want to be additional. We want to work with the private sector. One of our sectors, as the title of today's webinar, is going to be kind of wind energy. So we'll focus some of our investments and development activities on the onshore and offshore wind sectors. So in the onshore wind sector, for example, like there was a lot of traction now with the end of the kind of planning bans on onshore wind in England, which can be a good opportunity, same as like, for example, repowering. So there's quite a lot of opportunity around that. And then on the floating offshore wind sectors, we see GB as a catalyst to unlock opportunities and expand the emerging sectors. And there will be a lot of synergies where we'll act very, hand in hand with our supply chain arm. Next slide. On our supply chain side itself, so we see there's a strategic business case for reindustrialization in the UK, and we see GB is uniquely positioned to like coordinate different partners, department, private sector, deliver targeted intervention, and leverage this ecosystem of public finance partners and public institutions. So we will deploy £1 billion of public money to make this happen, with the aim to grow industries and create jobs. And like now, last slide, please. And finally, we have this specific GB supply chain fund already kind of about to go live, and it's 300 million, which was directly aimed at building UK manufacturing capacity of key constrained components in offshore wind and related network sectors. So we are aiming to open this to applications in December 2025 and drawing down funding from 2026 to 2030. So it's really aimed at the kind of offshore wind sector, trying to increase our manufacturing capacity, looking at constrained components, but also to increase jobs in the UK, especially in industrial clusters. You can see here in the table kind of our key kind of component scope, going from mooring and anchoring to like blades and nacelles. And on the network side, HVDC, but also like switch gear. So the whole range. That's it from my side. I went a bit over time, so apologies. We're handing over to Chronostate. Yep.
Thank you very much indeed, Sam. No, very, very informative. So, I mean, the key takeaway for me is that there are two sides to GB Energy. There is the energy developer owner, and then also potentially grant funding for investments coming in. Can I hand you now to Lucy from the National Wealth Fund?
I think it's Crown Estate next.
Oh, sorry. My eyesight went wrong. You're right. Bubadla, Crown Estate, apologies. How could I have forgotten you?
I'm sorry to be ahead of you, Lucy, in the billing. But anyway, lovely to meet you all. My name's Bubadla Trifunovic. I'm the Infrastructure Investment Manager within the Crown Estate. I've got a few slides here. Could you switch to the next one, please? So for those of you who don't know, the Crown Estate is a £16 billion portfolio. Over half of that is generally kind of central London property, but we also have agricultural holdings and regional property, as well as our ownership of the seabed. So we administer that on behalf of, all around the UK, marine spatial planning, as well as running the large leasing rounds in offshore wind themselves. We are not government. We operate commercially independently from government, but we have a remit to manage our assets, to create on commercial terms, to create profit, and then we pay that profit to Treasury every year. So we're kind of slightly public-private type organisation. We're a funny organisation that kind of sits in the middle. Anyway, we have three business units. The one that's relevant to us today is Marine, which administers the seabed, as I previously mentioned. And our infrastructure investment allocation around that is currently targeted at putting funds into enabling infrastructure for offshore wind. So what that means in reality is funding that's being made available through our board-approved strategy to support offshore wind ports, to support supply chain manufacturing, as well as test and demonstration facilities for, verifying components, as well as, ports also for vessel fabrication facilities. So we have initially allocated in the near term 400 million to support this. We, alongside GB Energy and National Wealth Fund, are intending to take a partnership approach with asset developers, owners and operators. We have flexibility to structure investments in a range of ways. So we can offer debt and equity, as well as hybrid instruments, but also, we've been around for 260 years managing property. So we're also able to offer investment via, freehold, leasehold, and property and assets in that sort of form. And as I previously mentioned, our kind of underwriting premise is really around creating financial returns as well as broader positive impact. Next slide, please. So we're rolling this investment program out in kind of in a number of ways. So first of all is through our actual offshore wind leasing and the spatial planning of the seabed. So I'll talk to you a bit around that in the next slide. But the actual capital allocation is distributed between two pots. So boxes 2 and 3 here. We've allocated 50 million fund to what we've called the Supply Chain Accelerator, which is actually a competitive annual round for development fund for projects that fit the criteria I previously mentioned. And the third box is the actual investment program, which is the remaining 350 million of capital, which we engage around bilaterally, directly with organisations. And there is a brochure with a lot more information about our two products, 2 and 3. I've put the link on the bottom of the slide. So if you're interested, you can have a read through that and get in contact if you've got any questions.
Hi, Tim. Anne here.
If you could go to the next slide, please. So just on that box 1, the signposting, we have this investment interest, but we actually also One of the things that we also do as an organisation is run the offshore wind leasing in the UK. So we're working very hard in the background to bring indications to market around future leasing. We put a publication out in September last year called Future Offshore Wind Leasing that had the highlights of where future offshore wind leasing is going to be. So predominantly the blue and the green areas, or a proportion of those, and a proportion of the grey areas. We are planning to issue more information around leasing round 6 towards the end of the year, beginning of next year, along with a kind of next level of granularity on this spatial plan called the Marine Delivery Route Map. So that will also help kind of form investment appetite and inform future scale of the opportunity for others. Next slide. So yeah, just to summarise very quickly, the offering to companies in the market, do get in touch. We've got the Supply Chain Accelerator DevEx Match Fund competitive annual process. We're running this for the second year this year, but it's a multi-year programme. We are offering up to 1.5 million this year to projects. That could be slightly higher next year. And we'll expect to announce the projects that we've supported this year in December at Spotlight in Edinburgh. And then also just the kind of capital investment programme for offshore wind ports and supply chain. We're looking to roll that out. Our ticket sizes, indicatively 10 to 50 million, but we are able to be flexible on that. And again, that could be structured as equity debt or freehold leasehold property. And very keen to work with companies who are perhaps applying for GB Energy's supply chain fund, or also seeking investment from National Wealth Fund to help join the dots and to work together. So very happy to take approaches and questions on any of those. But I think that's I'm going to wrap up there because I know we're rapidly heading over to Lucy at the National Wealth Fund.
And finally, Lucy, over to, well, not finally, but now it's your turn.
Thank you very much, and very, very pleased to be here. Lucy Crabtree, I'm a policy advisor at the National Wealth Fund, focused on wind and kind of related sectors. So for those who don't know us, the National Wealth Fund, we kind of describe ourselves as government's policy bank, investing capital at scale in kind of projects and companies that support the government's growth in clean energy missions. So I think of us a little bit like you might think of as another bank, except that we are government owned and we are investing in line with policy objectives. Next slide, please. A little bit about kind of how we do that. So from this slide, probably the main thing to kind of pick out and emphasise is that we decide how to deploy our capital on a kind of case-by-case basis by assessing projects or opportunities against 4 investment principles at the bottom of the slide here. So every investment we make must support either one or both of those kind of government's growth in clean energy missions. Each investment must be in a kind of capital intensive project or business or asset. Each investment must be intended to deliver a positive financial return. Obviously, intended is not always the same as kind of what plays out in practice, but certainly that has to be the intent at the point of investment. So we're not in the business of kind of giving out grants. And then the final investment principle, all investments must kind of look to crowd in significant private capital over time. So we're looking to kind of partner with the private sector. We're looking to make investments that will help crowd them in, not crowd them out. And we're looking to be additional in our investment activity to what would have happened kind of without us. Next slide, please. Just to note that we kind of have 4 priority sectors, one of which is clean energy. That's kind of, I'd say, the sector that is probably going to be the largest overall within our portfolio. So just to note that kind of we cover a much broader set of sectors, but clean energy being kind of really, really important within that. Next slide, please. We currently have 27.8 billion to deploy over the kind of the next few years. That's kind of split out in various different pots, which I won't go into the full detail of, but worth noting that within that we have 18 billion that is kind of general for kind of private sector projects, 4 billion that is dedicated to local authority lending. And then we have a 5.8 billion pot that is to be deployed during the course of this Parliament to 5 kind of specific sectors, and worth kind of noting that one of those is ports and supply chains, which is obviously very, very relevant to kind of today. I should also note at this point, these are quite large numbers in terms of deployment. And so for that reason, we are really looking at kind of those larger scale projects, you know, generally speaking, kind of 50 million and above, although in certain circumstances, we can look at kind of slightly lower than that. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is just to kind of to set out some of the impact we've had over the kind of course of our lifetime to date. We were actually founded originally as the UK Infrastructure Bank back in 2021. So some of you may have kind of heard of us in that form, but for the last year we've been the National Wealth Fund, and we've kind of got a refreshed set of kind of priorities and strategic approach. But in those kind of 4 or so years since 2021, kind of the kind of impact we've delivered has been, you know, really significant. So 7.5 billion invested across the UK, almost 22,000 jobs created and supported, and 16.2 billion of private finance mobilised. I'll maybe just note that there's a lot more information on our website. We're currently working kind of on our kind of full NWF strategic plan, but in the interim, there's lots of kind of documents on the website, including examples of previous investments we've made. I think on the next slide there should be a link or to the website. So please do go and kind of have a look. There is also on the website a contact form to get in touch if you want if you have a kind of project that you'd like to discuss with us, or an investment ask. And please do, I really would encourage you to kind of use that contact form. It is very closely monitored and the primary way to kind of get in touch with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Lucy. And from one fund to another bank now, the British Business Bank, Rachel.
Hi everyone, it's really nice to be here. I'm Rachel. I'm a senior investment manager at the British Business Bank, and I'm the bank's focal point for clean energy investment. I only joined the bank 2 months ago, previously having worked for 13 years in a large multinational energy company. If you go to the next slide. So the British Business Bank, we're the UK's economic development bank with purpose to enable financing for small, medium-sized businesses and to support the transition to net zero. We have 4 strategic priorities, which I put on the slide. I won't read through them one by one, but I'll draw out a little bit more as to how we're in action as I speak through the rest of my content. If we go to the next slide. So as we look at the bank, we have 2 very broad capabilities, banking and investment. I'm based in the investment group, and I'll focus the content of that today, but just very briefly on the banking group. They facilitate loans and guarantees, which are managed through some delivery partners that we have. On to the next slide. So focusing in on the investment group, we broadly manage 2 capabilities within this: venture capital investment directly into innovative companies, and venture capital investment into venture capital funds. These activities are very classically venture capital. We're looking fundamentally to back highly scalable, innovative companies. Just to give you a sense of scale, we are the largest investor into venture capital funds in the UK. And these funds that we invest into are also a key partner for how we directly invest into companies, as well as we can co-invest alongside those funds. To give you an example of some of the funds that we've invested in that have interests in clean energy, it would be Elbow Beach Capital, ETF Partners, Bloom Equity, Molten, Ada Ventures. As of 2025, we were awarded increased capital in support of the UK's industrial growth strategy, targeting £4 billion in investment across the 8 strategic sectors which are outlined in that strategy, of which clean energy is one focal area. With this, we're moving away from what's historically been a very programmatic approach to investing within the bank to greater flexibility in how we invest. So, you know, in principle, we're able to cover sort of activity across the full capital stack, and move away from that sort of criteria objective-based activity set that we had in the past. And that's what's shown at just at the top of the right-hand part of this slide here. With this new mandate, we also have greater flexibility across that maturity range, but we can also do things like lead investments, ensuring that continuity in financing. We continue to have a very strong emphasis on the growth stage, and we're reinforcing some of the activity here. For example, this year we also announced the British Growth Partnership, which will be crediting in pension funds into venture capital as well. So there is quite a lot to do and cover across that. We do lean heavily still on the delivery partners that we've built up through these programs, in the bottom right hand part of the slide. Particularly important at the early stage where the activity can be quite high in terms of volume. So we have things like the Regional Angels programme outlined here, which focuses at the seed stage, and it allows us to move a little bit faster and also ensure breadth of coverage by allowing us to kind of effectively co-invest with the partners in that programme. To give you a sense as to who they are in the clean energy space, some of the partners include things like the Green Angel Ventures or Deep Tech Labs, for example. In the context of today as well, we're also looking to strengthen our partnerships. So you'll hear from Innovate UK in a few minutes' time, and we have an MOU to help to enable stronger deal flow and information sharing so that we can continue that continuity of funding across the capital stack. Realise this is about wind today, and I'm speaking quite generally. So, at a very high level, I'm very open to equity investment opportunities in venture stage companies, which are innovative, scalable across the full life cycle from planning to operations and decommissioning. Don't want to be fully comprehensive in that or prescriptive, but just it could be companies with full system solutions, so things like floating offshore wind. Could also be innovative companies in supply chain, advanced materials, advanced manufacturing, and it could also be digital AI solutions, both in engineering and manufacturing, but also the operations side as well. I think some of the previous presenters discussed things like project level financing. That isn't really our space, and we would look to our other partners to support in that sense. On to the next slide. So that was a lot of information. I just wanted to also highlight that on our website we do have a really helpful finance orientation help tool that I flagged here as well, which can direct you to some of the other programs, including in the banking side of the group. So just in short, to kind of summarize what I've said, we're here to be flexible. If you don't fit within our specific focus areas, there's ways that we can connect you to our network, and also, from an equity perspective, maybe participate in your future rounds as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. Very, very useful. Can I hand over to Simon from the ORE Catapult? We're momentarily jumping from finance to a little bit more of the technology side of things.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Carl. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Simon Cheeseman from the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult. Next slide, please. So the Catapult is really at the coalface of innovation for technology development for offshore wind. We're a UK-wide organisation. We run the UK's test assets for offshore wind at sites in Blyth, just outside Newcastle, and then for floating offshore wind for mooring and anchoring up in Aberdeen. We also have our own offshore wind turbine up in Levermouth in Fife, which we provide as an open access test site for component developers, and also now for increasingly for autonomous system and drone developers. So we're over 300 people, mixture of researchers and engineers. And what we do is we work with original equipment manufacturers, we work with small, medium-sized enterprises and academia, and together we help to develop innovative technology and help commercialize that technology and get it to market. And in doing that, we're effectively developing technology that drives down the cost of offshore renewable energy on taxpayers' bills. So we've been around since 2012. We very much operate in that sort of innovation space. Our preferred business model is a collaborative business model where we're part funded by Innovate UK. And for every pound we get there, we try and match that with either an SME or an academic or a combination of those. And then the third pound is we get that from applying for grants to help develop projects. Next slide, please. So this is the range of activities that we cover. We're looking at next generation turbines. So we're able to test turbines at the moment that are up to 15 megawatts. Probably the onshore turbines that you see, the largest ones that you'll see are probably around 5 megawatts. Our own offshore turbine that we use is 7 megawatts. Probably for offshore wind, we're looking at sort of 15 megawatt turbines by 2030, but there are 25 megawatt turbines on the drawing board. We're very much focused on floating offshore wind and the technology challenges therein. Project pipeline is about trying to reduce the consenting time for offshore wind because it seems to be getting longer and longer at the moment. So we're increasingly looking at marine autonomous systems to help collect data for environmental impact assessment and continuous monitoring, and also for what we call now smart operations and maintenance. So how do we maintain these systems that are increasingly further and further offshore? They go further offshore because you want to put them into much more consistent winds. We do focus on marine energy as well, but this today's briefing is really about offshore wind. Future energy systems is really about sort of how do we manage when we sort of over deliver in terms of offshore energy, and we want to perhaps store that for use later and maybe use that to create hydrogen. So we're looking at sort of future energy systems there. And then an important part of our business that's grown up in the past couple of years is really looking at trying to make it clear to the UK what the supply chain opportunities are and to increase UK's percentage within that sort of supply chain delivery. Next slide, please. So some years ago, there was a deal struck between UK government and the Offshore Wind Industry Council, and that agreed to put funding in for supply chain development. Currently, the UK supply chain probably contributes to around 40% of activity in offshore wind, and the targets that have been agreed now are to raise that to at least 60%. We're able to fund a number of projects then from this sort of combined government and Offshore Wind Industry Council funding. These are competitive programs where supply chain companies are invited to bid in, and that's for companies that perhaps aren't involved in offshore wind at the moment, but think they have a product or would like to get involved. We can help you understand the market. We can help look at your product. We can help identify where the competition might be. But it's also for companies that are in offshore wind and want to increase their market share. The bullet point highlighted in red is one of our latest opportunities that went live a couple of weeks ago, and that's for helping sort of generate manufacturing capability and looking for projects between 300,000 and 25 million. So really exciting opportunities there. Next slide, please. And this is my final slide, really to say, if you've got any questions, I might not be around at the end of the session, but please make a note of my email, and I'm happy for people to get in touch. Thank you very much, Carl.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. We will make sure any hard questions that we can't answer will get sent to you. Sophie from Innovate UK, could you explain your role, please?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Carl. My name's Sophie Mifsud. I am a partnership manager in the global team at Innovate UK, but obviously here today I'm going to be representing Innovate UK as a whole and then touching a little bit on our specifics on our net zero programme. But for those of you who aren't aware, maybe I should have come a little bit before Simon, actually, because we're sort of talking about framing the innovation and R&D landscape a little bit. So Carl's slide right at the beginning demonstrated where we fit in the scale of all the different speakers here today. We're sort of in that early stage of research and development. Innovate UK is the UK's innovation agency. We sit under the umbrella organisation of UK Research and Innovation. So we sit alongside all the other research organisations, but we're the only part of that body that has a primary focus on support to business, but we do engage closely with all the universities and research organisations in the R&D space. And I've just looked up, actually, because we've just had the settlement from the Department of Science and Technology. Now, this is across the whole of UKRI, so not just on wind energy, but it gives you an idea of the scale. 55 billion has been announced for funding to R&D over the next spending review cycle. So obviously filter that down. It's not all in this space, but there's a recognition from government that the R&D space is really key. And so I think it's really helpful today to be part of this conversation for businesses looking at the beginning of that journey, or for those larger businesses who are looking to develop their R&D arms. So for those of you who aren't aware of Innovate UK, as I say, we're part of UKRI, but our purpose is to drive productivity and growth with high potential innovative businesses. I haven't got slides today, and I apologise for that, but because we've got a new chief exec, we're going through a bit of a refresh of our framing. So I didn't want to put things on slides today that might well change in the coming months. But please, after this, please do reach out to me, and I can give you more detail as things are developing from our side. So as I say, we're an organisation with a primary focus to driving productivity and growth, but we also are very involved in connecting businesses to partners, customers, investors at that early stage. Who do we work with? We can work with spin-out startups, growth and scale businesses. The refresh of our strategy may mean that we're looking a little bit more about a high potential for growth and scale, and tying into the British Business Bank, for instance, and the Scale Up Institute in that support pathway to make sure that there isn't a drop-off in support for businesses. We are very much aligned with the industrial strategy, and obviously the clean growth sector on that is really important in this area. As an organisation, we have 3 main domains, and one of those is net zero. So recognised with Innovate UK that it's a really significant part of the growth and scale landscape for businesses in the UK. And in that, just to broadly outline the types of funding, I know it's about funding today, but we do offer 2 different angles. We have funding and different types of funding, but we also have other support that is available to anybody who is a registered entity in the UK. So any business that's got a registered entity on Companies House can access any of the support provided by Innovate UK, be that financial or non-financial support. So just to touch on the types of financial support that we do provide broadly, and this isn't just within the net zero domain, but this is the types of funding that we do provide. So whether that's from grants to innovation loans, to investor partnerships program, and we have international investor partners as well as domestic, and then we do contracts for innovation. So there's a whole range depending on the scale and stage of business that we can provide support. In addition to the financial funding, we also do provide non-financial support, and especially important for those businesses looking at developing R&D and developing whether you need business support or access to IP information. Obviously, just as Simon just mentioned, we fund the Catapult network, and obviously the ORE Catapult is very relevant here, but so is too the high value manufacturing Catapult and potentially the digital Catapult, depending on where you are in the supply chain of your business. You might find those other catapults offer as relevant opportunities for you to test your innovation as well. And one thing I did want to mention here, because I think it's quite relevant for those larger businesses that are attending today, we have something called the Innovation Exchange, and that's somewhere that we provide a portal for businesses to be able to pose challenges that they are facing, and it's a procurement process so we can provide, so SMEs can bid in to the challenge, and then you have the selection process. We just facilitate this. There's no financial involvement from our perspective, but it's a portal for you to be able to pose a challenge and then get innovative ideas and solutions to those challenges through our network of businesses and SMEs and researchers that we are connected with. Just on specifics on support for offshore wind, we do within our net zero domain have experts that sit on various different panels and provide information and support to for instance, the foresighting reports on skills for offshore wind sector. We've got a couple of our senior leadership team who are inputting into that, and if you've got an interest in seeing the reports that have been produced on the foresighting skills and labour reports, then please do contact me. And we have fed into the Offshore Wind Industry Council, and we sit on the board there as well. So we're connected into the whole range of the industry at the early stage. So we're really a good portal for you to use if you have questions about R&D, about developing businesses, or engaging with innovative businesses to further develop or pick up challenges that you face. I've realised I've probably taken a few more minutes than I should have. Apologies for that. But if you've got any questions on Innovate UK, please direct them to me, and I will make sure that the sector expert is responding to you if I haven't been able to do it today. So thanks very much for having me.
Thank you very much indeed, Sophie. Melissa, can I hand over to you from the Clean Jobs office in DESNZ?
Thank you, Carl. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Bogley, and I'm one of the heads of the Office for Clean Energy Jobs, which sits in the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. Our team was set up to focus more on developing the skills and workforce that we need for our energy and net zero sectors, which are critical to deliver our mission. So we work quite closely with our other government departments, Skills England and devolved governments, because Skills is devolved in the UK, to address our emerging workforce challenges. And really, the kind of UK's commitment is underpinned by having the workforce readiness in place, and wind is a really central part of the strategy, and we need to make sure that we've got a skilled and reliable workforce as a priority. So be very interested to hear what we've been doing. By 2030, as Carl already opened up, there will be a huge wind capacity, which will also create thousands of new roles and jobs across engineering, operations and maintenance. And across clean energy, we will expect the workforce to double from around 440,000 to 860,000. But we'll look at wind probably in the range of 100 to 145,000 direct and indirect supported jobs. And just last month, following the Clean Power Action Plan 2030 last year and the industrial strategy being published over the summer, we followed up with the Clean Energy Jobs Plan, which really firmly sets out on how, together with industry and unions and education providers, will work together on providing the skills and the workforce required for our clean energy projects. The way we've kind of looked at this plan is we want to make sure, one, we deliver a skilled pipeline. Two, we make sure we harness the full potential across our UK workforce. Then three, create good quality jobs for everyone and kind of moving into clean energy sectors. And then we want to make sure that every nation and region across the UK will benefit from it. So we are now embarking, and hopefully with you too, on delivering this plan over the next few years. And I want to give you a bit of a flavour on what some of the measures we've set out in the plans are. So in particular, the government is providing an extra 1.2 billion of investment into skills across 28 and 29. There's a specific engineering skills package that has been set up over 4 years with 182 million for engineering courses at level 4 and 5. The levels might not be too familiar with you, but we're very happy to kind of bring you up to speed. There's a new introducing technical excellence colleges that will specialise in training skilled workforce to kind of drive our priority projects, which will be in sectors such as advanced manufacturing, clean energy, digital and technologies, and defence, of which 175 will go specifically to technical excellent colleges that will focus on clean energy, including offshore wind. There's also a 625 million pound construction skills package, which will deliver over 4 years additional 60,000 skilled construction workers. So as you can see, there's lots of funding put into reskilling and upskilling. There's also something more specific that we're looking at. We actually have a really skilled workforce, for example, in the North Sea, where we're looking also to transition some of that workforce into, specifically, we found offshore wind is a high job family similarity. So we've launched the Energy Skills Passport, which will help people to identify qualification and routes and maps into clean energy sectors. We've launched an additional 20 million of bespoke career advice for North Sea workers to transition again into clean energy together with Scottish Government. We launched a regional skills pilot to help us understand a little bit more on what are actually local and devolved solutions that work very well, and we can kind of bring the skilled workforce across, which are in Aberdeen and Lincolnshire, Cheshire and Pembrokeshire, so really across the UK, to identify some kind of more regional measures. We also have been kind of looking at, again, as I mentioned, how can we bring some of the skilled workforce across, and have worked really closely with the Ministry of Defence of bringing across veterans into the clean energy sector, who, again, have a really strong skill set to support us in the energy transition. And really, I'm mindful of time, so I'll cut it a bit short. But there are lots of practical steps that we are making sure that the workforce is in place to kind of support your projects going forward. And we'll continue to develop this plan together, as I said, with industry and education providers and unions to make sure that we have that workforce and continue to skill and have a mobile workforce that can work between sectors and our growth sectors in the future. I'll hand back to Carl to make sure we'll get through our ambitious agenda today.
Thank you very much indeed, Melissa. I've made a mental note that we should elongate these sessions or give ourselves more time to speak. So apologies for rattling through this, but thank you very much. Sean, UK Export Finance, what can they do in this space?
Oh, thanks a lot. And yeah, pleasure to be on the line, and great to see so many people in attendance today. My name's Sean Burnage, and I'm Regional Head of Origination and Client Coverage at UK Export Finance. So essentially responsible for the business development across a number of overseas geographies, including Asia Pacific and Europe. So UK Export Finance, UKEF, you might ask yourself what it is. It's UK's export credit agency. And essentially we're the government department that's here to facilitate UK exports. And that's by allowing kind of UK exporters and project sponsors to access more competitive terms when it comes to commercial financing. So how do we do this? We generally tend to do this through offering UK government guarantees, and in more limited circumstances, direct lending. And this is really to assist the private market in de-risking projects. I think, look, we've heard from a host of other PUFINs on the call today, but unlike some of those, we operate exclusively in the debt space, and our support, particularly in the overseas context, anyway, is tied to specific UK export contracts. You might ask yourself a question about, our capacity and what we can do to support UK exporters, and how much, I guess, capital we have at our disposal. Our current global capacity is quite sizable. It sits at £60 billion. And if you took the value of our portfolio across all the different sectors that we support, it's nearly 59 billion, so quite sizable. If you had a backward look into the last financial year, we underwrote £14.5 billion worth of business, and that kind of equated to supporting, roughly 7,000 jobs back in the UK. When it comes to our product offering, if you looked at our medium to long-term products, essentially they allow project sponsors to access more competitive commercial terms. So in a practical sense, I guess this means that, the project sponsor will see a notable reduction in the rate of interest that they're charged by a commercial bank. And I guess also it allows them to kind of access, longer tenor periods than they otherwise would do commercially, making, I guess, one of our guarantees or our direct lending product an attractive prospect for overseas sponsors. You might think, well, how does that impact our exporters? And I guess in short, really, it allows them to be paid as though it were a cash contract, hopefully giving them some, certainty over the revenue that they'll generate from their export. And really help them kind of, I guess, along that export journey. We're sector agnostic as an ECA, bar a few exceptions, which is kind of oil and gas, which we are unable to support. But I thought I'd give you a bit of insight into, our support for kind of offshore wind. And it'll really come as no surprise that, given the strength of the UK supply chain in offshore wind, UKEP has kind of developed I guess a reputation as a leading kind of ECA in the sector. To date, we've provided close to £2 billion worth of support. And this is across, 7 projects. We've worked with, I guess, renewable energy developers, offshore wind developers in particular, like Ørsted, CIP, Corio, and Northland Power. I think it's fair to say that ticket sizes on these projects can vary, and are usually proportional to the value of the UK export contract. I'll give you an example of a project that I worked on, which was Fengmiao 1, which is located in Taiwan, in the Taiwanese Strait. This project, it had a £55 million export contract, which was an installation vessel from a UK-based company, I guess called Kadela, formerly Seajax, and this allowed us to support a £184 million UKEF tranche in that particular transaction, so roughly 3.5 times the value of the export contract. I think, it's fair to say with that, in that transaction, we've kind of clubbed up with other ECAs as well to make up part of the wider kind of capital structure in the project. So we're able to cooperate, I guess, with our counterparts, in other countries where there's a prevalent supply chain for offshore wind as well. I'll conclude by saying, look, it's fair to say our support doesn't just stop there. We also have a suite of trade finance products that are available to support the UK supply chain that are feeding into these products as well. These projects as well. So I think these range from things to kind of like bonding lines, working capital support, and I guess they're really all designed to make sure that the exporter themselves are in the kind of best position to fulfil the contracts in question for these projects. So with that, they're not mutually exclusive of each other. So we can support on kind of both sides of the house per se. But look, I know we're pressed for time, so I'll kind of conclude there. And
thank you, Sean. And I realise it's an impossible task to explain all your wonderful services you do.
Don't worry, Cole. Next time I'll make sure that I'm a bit further up the
the agenda. Well, yes, indeed. Finally, last but certainly not least, Chris from Tees Valley, one of the Freeport sites in the UK.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. So, very, very briefly, I'll keep it as quick as I can. So, the Tees Valley is one of England's mayoral combined authority regions, or mayoral strategic authorities, depending on what you want to call it. We're a partnership of 5 local authorities in the northeast of England: Darlington, Hartlepool, Middlesbrough, Redcar, Cleveland, and Stockton-on-Tees. We're an area with a huge history of industry, historically chemicals and steel. So from the founding of the Stockton-Darlington Railway in 1825, 200 years ago, last month, there was the Industrial Revolution hit the northeast of England, and we were Teesside became known for iron, then steel, then ultimately chemicals. We've used our freeports that we were, I believe, the first freeport out of the stocks in terms of in terms of being approved for its business case. But we've been promoting the idea of freeports in the UK and to various governments various governments over the years, and then finally a competition was launched, and we were able to secure one. We are well founded in terms of infrastructure, both air and sea, but road and rail. Next slide, please. The job of the combined authority, different combined authorities around the country have different devolution deals. We're all led by a directly elected mayor and have a cabinet made up of the leaders of the local authorities. We are to secure investment, create jobs, and transform life in the Tees Valley, or as our mayor puts it, make life better in Teesside. A big part of this, next slide, please. A big part of this is what we call developing our modern industrial cluster. So we, like all the other strategic level authorities in the UK, have been putting together our local growth plan. That is, how do we respond to the government's industrial strategy and sub-documents like the Clean Energy Sector Plan? Tees Valley, alongside the wider northeast of England, is recognised in the Clean Energy Sector Plan as a centre, as also a key destination for clean energy investment. And we have said that the greening of our existing industrial base, such as our chemicals cluster, and building new energy, including offshore wind. So there will be a significant amount of offshore wind landed from the Dogger Bank and Sophia wind farms in the Tees Valley, but also building the building the renewable supply chain there, which I'll touch on in a second, is really important. So we've said our globally competitive sectors are green manufacturing and energy, supported by advanced manufacturing, and because of the Teesside Freeport, offshore wind fits firmly into that. Next slide, please. So we are the UK's first and largest operational freeport. Next slide, please. We have secured more than 200 million in public funding has been spent on the site that is now the Freeport. That's not all free funding from the sort of Freeports program. A lot of it has been remediating the former steelworks site, which closed 10 years ago last month. In fact, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Offshore Wind Northeast Conference this morning, and I thought it was poignant that it was also that site, that it was 10 years this year since the steelworks had closed, and such a significant development had occurred supporting the offshore wind industry. It was worth noting. But on that site, across the Teesside Freeport's made up of two sites: the Teesworks site, which is our former steelworks, supporting energy industries and other industrial development, but so far has a significant investment from Sayer Wind, which I'll touch on in a minute, and another with BP's Net Zero Teesside carbon capture power plant. More than 5 billion investment in total there, and it also has tax incentives available on the Wilton International Chemical Complex to the south. Next slide, please.
Chris, can I get you to whistle stop? Sorry, I'm conscious that we're hitting the buffers.
No worries. So the part I promised to say on behalf of say for the DBT was the role of the Freeports is establishing national hubs for global trade investment, regeneration of regions of the UK, and creating hotbeds of innovation. I'd like to think we do all of those. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The Sayer Wind facility, I think, is a crowning achievement in terms of offshore wind and the Teesside Freeport. That is an almost £1 billion investment by a Korean steelmaker who had made no investment. It was their first investment in the UK. Partly based on Freeport incentives, and partly based on an investment from what was the UK Infrastructure Bank, now the National Wealth Fund, in the accompanying offshore wind quay. Sayer chose to put this factory, which is 800 meters long at its longest point. You can put London's Shard, the tallest building, end on end in it 2.5 times, and it took 12 weeks to get planning permission in Teesside because of our sort of our take on industrial development, because of both Freeports and other UK sort of publicly backed financial mechanisms. We were able to secure this monopile factory producing 3,000-ton monopiles for the offshore wind industry for the Tees Valley and UK PLC, and it was opened by His Majesty the King earlier this year. Next slide, please. The Steel River Quay is the investment that was backed by UKIB. That was the first phase has been completed, and as far as crowding in investment goes, the port next door is now looking at adding its own kilometre of offshore wind offshore wind quay as well. So you can see Freeport's have had a major impact on the sort of the growth of offshore wind as the offshore wind supply chain in the Tees Valley, but also more generally on our sort of attractiveness as an investable destination. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Sorry, Chris, for you being the one who had to take the flex, and Sean as well. Apologies. We really did want to have a questions and answers here, but I think due to time, it's going to be very difficult to have it. But I just wanted to highlight one thing that is very important. I'm conscious that we've thrown at you a whole different dispersed organisations that can help you invest, not only in the innovation side, but also in the financial side, and indeed the site side of things. And it might seem all a little bit complicated, but what I'd like to highlight is we're all a team. We're all meshed together. We all have connections with one another. So please do feel free to reach out to any one of us. No question is wrong. If you land at the wrong desk, we will rapidly direct you to the right desk. That is not a problem. But I'd just like to thank you very much, and certainly also to Tancred and Despina who organised it, and we'll be happy to be primary contacts for you in what you need to do. For those of you who will be in Aberdeen, I look forward to seeing you at the conference. On that note, I'd like to thank all our speakers for the impossible task of explaining what you do in 5 minutes. It sounds like speed dating. Thank you very much again for listening. Please do ask questions if you need to through the contacts you have. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.